You know that feeling when you walk into your boss's office, or even think about walking into their office to ask for more money? Your chest gets tight, your heart races, your mouth goes dry, and you're sitting there thinking, why am I like this? I'm a capable person, I do good work, so why do I feel like I'm about to ask my parent for permission? Here's what nobody tells you. You're not broken. Your body isn't malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it evolved to do, and I'm going to explain why. Because once you understand the neurobiology of this fear, the actual mechanism behind it, something shifts. You're not just trying to overcome your anxiety anymore. You're understanding why it's there. And that changes everything. This is going to take about 15 minutes, but by the end, you'll understand why your nervous system perceives your boss as a threat, why imposter syndrome is actually not what you think it is, why the system itself is rigged against certain people asking, and what you can actually do about it. If you're ready to understand the real psychology behind this fear, not just tactics, but the actual mechanism, subscribe now so you don't miss it. This changes how you see the whole conversation. Let's start. So here's what the research shows. 80% of American professionals think they deserve a raise. 80%. But only 60% actually plan to ask for one, which means 4 out of 5 people think they're underpaid and do nothing about it. And if you dig deeper, if you ask people why they don't ask, the numbers get more specific. 32% say they don't know how to approach the conversation. Not that they're lazy, not that they don't want the money. They literally don't know the words to use. 28% are afraid of hearing no. And I mean afraid, not cautious. Afraid. 22% are worried about their job security, like asking for a raise might get them fired. Now, here's the wild part. 70% of people don't even discuss salaries with their coworkers. So most of these people don't actually know if they're being underpaid. They're paralyzed in a vacuum. And maybe the most shocking number? 37% of Americans have never asked for a raise in their entire career. Never. They've worked for 10, 15, 20 years and never once sat down and asked for more money. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so people are anxious about money. People hate conflict. Why should I care about this? Because you're probably one of these people. And if you're not, someone you love is. And the thing is, the thing that's really going on isn't that people are weak or lazy or unmotivated. It's that something biological, something neurological is getting in the way. And once you understand what that is, you can work with it instead of against it. Here's what happens in your body when you think about asking for a raise. Your amygdala, this little almond-shaped structure in your brain, one of the oldest parts in evolutionary terms, suddenly perceives a threat. And I don't mean a conscious threat. Your amygdala doesn't think in words. It thinks in survival categories. Your boss isn't a tiger. Your boss isn't going to eat you. But from your nervous system's perspective, your boss might as well be. Because your boss controls your paycheck, which is your survival resource, food, shelter, medical care, your reputation, because a bad reference can follow you, your job security, because they can literally fire you. And when your nervous system perceives that someone in power controls your survival resources, it activates what's called the HPA axis. That's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It's your body's stress response system, and it floods your bloodstream with cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. It's real. It's measurable. You can test for it. It doesn't matter that you logically know your boss isn't going to eat you. Your nervous system doesn't work on logic. Your sympathetic nervous system activates. That's your fight or flight system. Your heart rate goes up. Your breathing becomes shallow. Blood rushes away from your digestive system, and your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that does complex thinking and speech, and redirects to your muscles, preparing you to either fight or run. This is why people describe asking for a raise as feeling cornered, not bored, not mildly nervous. Cornered, because your body is literally in a state that's designed for survival, not negotiation. Here's the really wild part. This all happens before you even walk into the office. Just thinking about it triggers this cascade. You wake up the morning you're planning to ask. You remember, oh, I'm doing this today. And your cortisol goes up. Your nervous system shifts into alert mode. By the time you walk in, you've already been stressed for hours. And this is why so many people describe the moment like this. I prepared for weeks. I had all my data. I knew exactly what I was going to say. And the moment I sat down, my mind went blank. This isn't a memory problem. This isn't that you're not smart enough or prepared enough. It's that your prefrontal cortex was literally offline. Your sympathetic nervous system hijacked your brain. You were in survival mode, not negotiation mode. The biological term for this is called amygdala hijacking, and it's not something you can just logic away. Now, let's add another layer to this. About 44% of high-achieving professionals experience something called imposter syndrome, or the imposter phenomenon, as researchers call it now. And I want to be really careful with this term, because it gets thrown around a lot. People use it casually, like it's just being a little insecure, but it's not. Imposter syndrome is a genuine psychological experience where people with legitimate accomplishments literally cannot internalize them. They look at what they've accomplished and think, that was luck. That was timing. Someone else did the real work. I just happened to be there. I haven't been found out yet. And the accompanying emotions are real. Fear, anxiety, self-doubt, perfectionism. Researchers have measured this. It's not imagination. Now, women experience this at roughly twice the rate of men, and there are theories about why. Socialization, stereotype threat, different feedback they receive. But the important part for this conversation is, when you're experiencing imposter syndrome and you're sitting with your boss to ask for a raise, something is happening in your head. Your brain is saying, they're going to realize I'm a fraud. Not, they're going to say no. Not even, they're going to be mad, but they're going to see through me. And when that's the internal script running, do you know what happens? You ask for less. You say things like, I don't want to be greedy, but I know times are tight, but maybe I might not deserve this, but you're negotiating against yourself before you even sit down, because part of you believes they're going to realize you're not actually worth what you're asking for, that they've made a mistake with you, and you're trying to get ahead of that moment. The cruelty here is that imposter syndrome often hits the people who are actually most competent, because competent people notice what they don't know. They notice the gaps. Incompetent people, they don't know what they don't know, so they feel confident. But competent people see the complexity. They see all the things they still have to learn, and they interpret that as evidence that they're somehow not the real deal. This is why the smartest people in the room often feel like the most fraudulent. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly a little sad, because this fear isn't random. It has origins. Think back to when you were a kid. Your parents were in complete, absolute control. They controlled when you could speak, whether you were heard, what happened when you asked for something. For some of you, asking directly was treated as bad, like you were being rude or selfish. Don't ask for seconds, be grateful for what you have. Don't ask questions during dinner. Eat. Don't demand things from us. We provide for you. For others, it wasn't about prohibition. It was about conditionality. You learned that asking, or more specifically, getting what you asked for, depended on how you asked, how you looked, whether you'd done everything else perfectly first. Love felt conditional on performance. And some of you learned that asking felt dangerous, because the person you asked had power over you, and you couldn't predict how they'd respond. Here's the thing about that conditioning. It doesn't just disappear when you become an adult. Your nervous system doesn't get an upgrade on your 18th birthday. It's still running the same patterns. Now you're in your 30s or 40s, and your boss fills that parental role. Not because your boss is like your parent, but because the dynamic is structurally similar. They have power. You are dependent on them. And you're in a hierarchical relationship where your request could be denied. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish between, I asked my mom for dessert when I was 7, and she said no, and I felt rejected. And I'm asking my boss for a 15% raise at age 34. Both activate the same neural pathways. Both trigger the same fear response. Both feel like they have the same stakes. What if they decide I'm not worth it? And here's the sneaky part. That question, what if they decide I'm not worth it, gets interpreted by your nervous system as, what if they decide I'm not worth loving? Because as a child, your parents' approval was literally your survival. You depended on them for food, shelter, protection. So being rejected by a parent didn't just feel bad, it felt dangerous. Now, as an adult, you're not dependent on your boss for survival. Logically, you know that. But your nervous system? It doesn't know that. It only knows, this person has power. This person's approval matters. And what if I ask for something and they disapprove? Here's something that's going to sound dark, but I need to say it. Your fear of asking for a raise? It's not irrational. In fact, it's one of the most rational responses possible to the situation you're actually in. Because the power imbalance is real. Your boss controls your paycheck, your job security, your reference, your career trajectory. You need their approval to keep those things. They don't need your approval for anything. That's not a neutral negotiation. That's a person in power negotiating with a person who's economically dependent. And here's where it gets structural. If you're a woman, there's an additional layer. New research from Harvard and UC Berkeley, published just in the last few years, found something that completely overturned decades of conventional wisdom. Researchers surveyed almost 2,000 MBA graduates and alumni. They asked, have you ever asked for a raise or negotiated your compensation? Everyone assumed the answer would be, women ask less, men ask more. That's why there's a pay gap. But that's not what they found. Women, at least these educated professional women, reported negotiating their salaries at the same rate or higher than men. 64% of women had negotiated versus 59% of men. So women are asking, but here's the catch. When they ask, they're rejected more often. They report being told no at higher rates than men asking for the same things. And 10 years later, the pay gap hasn't narrowed. Women in that cohort earned about 63% of what men earned, down from 88% when they graduated. So the narrative that women don't ask is actually wrong. The reality is more like, women ask. The system says no more often. And this isn't because women ask worse. Researchers looked at how women and men framed their requests, and the tactics were similar. But here's what they found. The perception of the request was different. A man asking assertively for what he wants? That reads as confident leadership. A woman asking assertively for what she wants? That can read as aggressive or demanding. The same words, different reception. So if you're a woman and you have a nagging feeling that asking might backfire, that's not paranoia. That's an accurate read of a biased system. And then there's the money taboo itself. In America, we treat money like it's obscene. Religion? We'll debate it. Politics? We'll fight about it. Sex? There are entire industries built on it. But money? Money is the one thing everyone thinks about and nobody talks about. Most families never discuss salaries. Most people don't know what their colleagues make. So you're sitting there, negotiating in a vacuum. You don't have market data. You don't know if you're asking for something reasonable. And you're trying to convince someone to pay you more when you can't even talk about it without feeling uncomfortable. So here's what I'm saying. Your fear that you might get rejected? You might. Your fear that the system is rigged? It is. Your fear that asking might have consequences? Those consequences could be real. This isn't in your head. This is reality. You know what's wild? Most people are terrified to ask for a raise. But they don't talk about being terrified. They hide it. They come home and tell their partner, "Oh, I just didn't think it was the right time." Or, "They seemed busy." Or, "The economy is uncertain." Anything except, "I was too scared." Because admitting you're scared feels like admitting you're weak. And if you're weak, maybe you're not actually competent. Maybe your boss will figure it out. But here's the thing. Everyone is scared. The person sitting across from the desk from you, the one who seems so confident and together, has probably felt this same fear multiple times in their career. But we don't talk about it, so it stays invisible. And isolation makes it worse. Because when something is invisible, you interpret it as abnormal. You think, why am I like this? Why can't everyone else just ask? Not, this is a human nervous system responding to a real power dynamic in a culture that never taught us to negotiate. And that shame, that silence, it perpetuates itself. Because if people aren't talking about the fear, they're not getting support. They're not getting permission to feel it. And they're definitely not getting useful information about how to move through it. Okay, so here's where this pivots. Because understanding the neurobiology of your fear doesn't mean the fear goes away, but it changes everything about what you do with it. Instead of thinking, I'm terrified because I'm weak, you can think, I'm nervous because my nervous system correctly perceives that there's a power imbalance here. Of course I'm nervous. Instead of thinking, everyone else can ask, so there's something wrong with me, you can think, everyone else is also terrified. They're just hiding it better. Instead of thinking, if they say no, I'm a failure, you can think, if they say no, it could be about budget. It could be about timing. It could be about bias. It doesn't mean I'm not worth more money. See the shift? It's not fixing your anxiety. It's removing the shame from the anxiety. And that's actually the thing that paralyzes people most. Not the fear itself, but the shame about the fear. The belief that you shouldn't feel what you're feeling. Once you know the fear is neurologically valid, you can actually move. So if you're sitting there thinking, okay, I understand why I'm terrified, now what? Here are 3 things that actually help. First, regulate your nervous system before the conversation. Not an hour before, not the night before, right before. 5 minutes of box breathing. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4. Or a brief walk. Or listening to a specific song that calms you. The goal is to get your nervous system out of sympathetic, fight or flight mode and into parasympathetic, rest and digest mode. Because if your prefrontal cortex is offline, all your preparation is useless. Second, bring data, not emotion. Your market rate for your role, your accomplishments, what you've generated for the company. The moment you frame this as data, it shifts from, please approve me, to, here's the business case. And that's a different negotiation. Third, practice with lower stakes first. Talk to a trusted friend or mentor about what you're going to say. Ask them to play your boss. Practice saying it out loud, multiple times. Because here's what happens with repetition. Your nervous system learns. It learns, okay, I've said this word before. I'm still alive. This is safe. Your amygdala gets desensitized. The fear doesn't disappear, but it becomes less intense. And then, when it's actually happening, you're drawing on neural pathways you've already activated. You're not discovering them in the moment. One more thing. A lot of the terror around asking comes from, what if they say no? So let's actually talk about that scenario, because it's not actually as catastrophic as it feels. First, if they say no, you now have information. You know your current position. You know they don't think you're worth more right now. That's useful. Second, you can ask why. Is it a budget thing? Is it a timing thing? When might this be possible? Because a no in January might be different from a no in June. Third, you can negotiate for other things. More flexible hours, more vacation days, a different role, professional development. And fourth, and this is the one that's hard to face, but important, if your company consistently says no to raises, if they consistently undervalue you, if they're willing to risk losing you rather than pay you fairly, that's information too. That tells you whether you want to stay there. And that's actually valuable information because it gives you permission to start looking elsewhere. Because the market value of your work doesn't change based on what your current boss will pay. If one company won't pay you fairly, another one will. Here's something I think about a lot. Our ancestors experienced real, immediate threats. Saber-toothed tigers, starvation, exposure, and their nervous systems got really good at detecting threat. The ones who were anxious about every rustle in the grass, they survived. The ones who thought everything was fine, they didn't. So we evolved to be afraid, to anticipate danger, to expect the worst so we could be prepared. But now we're living in an environment where those old threat detection systems don't really serve us. Our boss isn't going to eat us, but our nervous system doesn't know that. It just knows person in power, resources at stake, potential rejection. And it does what it's been doing for 300,000 years. It gets scared. And we're living in a culture that punishes that fear, that treats it as weakness, that doesn't give us permission to feel it. So we end up in this weird place where our biology is completely normal, but our culture says it's shameful. And that contradiction is exhausting. I want to say something clearly. If you're terrified to ask for a raise, it's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because you have a nervous system. And that nervous system is responding to a real power dynamic in a culture that doesn't give you tools to navigate it. You're not weak. You're not broken. You're not cowardly. You're human. And your humanness includes having a body that's trying to keep you safe. And the good news is, now that you understand why you're scared, you can make different choices about what to do with that fear. You can work with your biology instead of against it. You can prepare in ways that actually help. You can move forward even while you're nervous, because nervous and capable are not mutually exclusive. Here's why this actually matters, beyond just getting a raise. Every time you don't ask, you're internalizing a message. I'm not worth more than what I'm being given. My needs don't matter enough to voice. It's safer to be small. And that compounds. Over a 10-year career, if you never negotiate, you're not just missing out on one raise. You're missing out on compounding increases. You're missing out on what you could have built. But more than that, you're training your nervous system that asking is dangerous. So the next time you need to ask for something, time off, a promotion, a boundary, anything, it's harder. But every time you do ask, even if you're terrified, you're teaching your nervous system something different. You're saying, I can feel this fear and do it anyway. That rewires you, not just for money, but for your whole life. Look, I know you're terrified. That's not weakness. That's biology. But your boss is probably also nervous. They expect you to ask. Some of them respect when you do. So understand your fear. Don't let it stop you. If this video helped you understand something you've been feeling, subscribe. And if you want to support these deep dives into the psychology of work and money, consider becoming a member. Either way, go have that conversation. You deserve it.